Dreams. We all have dreams, right? Hopefully they're more dreams than nightmares, but I remember in college having a dream about a friend that I hadn't really heard from a long time, and got up, went to the mail room at college, and there's a letter from her. It's weird, type stuff, and I don't remember most of my dreams. I'm not sure if you're like that or not, but every once in a while, right, one sticks very vividly in my head after I wake up. So we're looking at someone today in the Bible who had an unforgettable dream. There's only one solitary verse that mentions the wife of Pontius Pilate. And within those few words, her name's not even stated. Matthew's gospel records her cameo at the crucial moment of Jesus' trial that would soon determine his fate. Court is officially in session when an interruption breaks the concentration of the Roman governor, Pilate. From Matthew 27, verse 19, while Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." And that's it. Nothing more is ever mentioned in all the pages of the biblical account. Historians are cloudy and they're not in consensus about who she was and what she did after that pivotal moment in time, but they remind us that she was referred to by various names in other accounts as Claudia Procula, Claudia Procles, Saint Procula, Saint Claudia. So for our purposes this morning, we'll simply call her Claudia. Who is this Claudia? What happened to her because of this dream? And what was the source of her dream? And how did she suffer from it? What did Claudia believe about Jesus? Who did she say Jesus was? No one really knows these answers, at least not with any certainty. We do know this: Claudia was so moved by her dream that she interrupted her husband in the middle of official Roman business. Matthew states in this verse, while Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message. So the phrase "sitting on the judgment seat," that's not just, talking about Pilate's posture and location, okay? To be sitting on the judgment seat meant he was acting in an official capacity. He was being the judge. And not even a governor's wife dared intrude on such proceedings. Can you imagine if your husband or wife is a judge in court and court's in session, big murder trial going on, and all of a sudden, you get a phone call, You don't do that, right? And you certainly didn't do it back then, unless there was a serious crisis going on. So Claudia must have had some dream, let me tell you, that to cause her to take such a risk that she would send a message to interrupt this decisive moment between Pilate and Jesus. Historians and theologians disagree on what the dream meant and where it came from, and what Claudia did with it as a result. Because she had all of these disturbing images during her sleep in the early hours of Good Friday. Now, some believe Claudia converted and became a follower of Jesus because of the impact and the intensity of this dream. Theologians from around the Middle Ages suggest that the dream was from God, and it resulted in eventually her becoming a prominent person of faith. So much so that she is recognized as a saint in the Eastern Orthodox and the Ethiopian Church. Other theologians take the position that Claudia's dream actually didn't come from God, it came from Satan himself. So think about this. That position believes it was Satan who sent the dream to try to influence her husband. Because if she could get her husband to get Jesus off in this trial, to have him proclaimed innocent. Then he wouldn't go to the cross and he wouldn't die for sins. And Satan would love that, right? What we know for sure is that nobody really knows where the dream came from, what happened to Claudia, from at least a salvation standpoint. What we do know from Matthew's verse is that she in fact had a dream, and this dream had an impact on her. The language indicates that the dream seemed to haunt her, and it didn't stop once she woke up. Have nothing to do with that righteous man. But it wasn't that simple. It wasn't that simple. Politics were involved a lot in what was going on here, and Pilate was in a very precarious place. Caesar wanted peace in the land and not riots, and fearing that he would be the cause, or seen as the cause of this disruption, he gave in to the pressures of the Pharisees, and he chose to ignore his wife's warnings. So Pilate, in dramatic fashion, finally gives in. We read in Matthew 27:24, when Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but instead an uproar was starting, he took water and he washed his hands in front of the crowd, and he said, I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility. And within the hour, Jesus would be on the cross, and within 6 hours, he would cry out and give up his spirit in death. The nightmare of the crucifixion would claim Jesus. His suffering on the cross would far outmatch any sufferings Claudia had from this dream. But Jesus' suffering and death would lead to our rescue from sin, death, Satan, and hell for all who call on his name. Who do you say that I am? That's the name of the series. Claudia said he was a righteous man or an innocent man. Pilate said he couldn't find any guilt in him, so he thought he was an innocent man. They both thought that they could just walk away from it, have nothing to do with this man. And Pilate washes his hands and says, I am innocent of this man's death. Who do you say that I am? I don't know, but you know what? It's kind of uncomfortable. It's too complicated. It's too controversial. So I'm just going to walk away from it all. I'll have nothing to do with that man, and I take no responsibility for him. And that's where a lot of people live today. Let's just distance ourselves. But no, Claudia, you cannot distance yourself. You must do something with the one who stands before your husband. I don't know. That's a fair response to the question, who do you say that Jesus is? I don't know. But a person can't simply walk away from the question. You can't wash your hands of it all and move on with life without coming to a conclusion once faced with the question. Because once you're faced with the question of who Jesus is, you got to answer it. The problem is, Pilate, you are not innocent of this man's blood, see? No one is. Every one of us crucified Jesus because of our sin, and ignoring it and avoiding it and pretending to be some type of innocent bystander is not an option. So when I was a pastor in upstate New York, we took our youth group on a weekend retreat down in this state forest in Pennsylvania. Somebody in the church family owned a cabin down there. No electricity, no running water except for a brook out in front and an outhouse, which was, trust me, glowing by the end of the weekend. While we were there, we played a game. I had organized a game I had found in it, but the game had a lesson in it. So just bear with me on this. We broke up into 3 teams. So we broke them up into 3 equal teams. Each team had an adult leader. And it was a capture the flag type of game, you know? Now, 2 of the teams were playing against each other. And their adult leaders, one on each of those teams, were the generals of that team. and whatever they said goes. That was part of the rules. Okay? But the third team was not one of those against each other. The third team represented a town where people were living in the midst of this battle and with the other two teams that was happening around them. And their leader was not a general, they were the mayor of the town. And they were playing games and doing all kinds of fun things. And the two battling teams had this option to try to convince the people of the town to join their team. Because if they could do that, they would get an advantage, because now they'd have more people than the other team, you see. And the mayor's job was to try to convince everybody to just don't get involved. Just let's have fun. Don't get involved. You could get hurt, you know. You could get killed in the battle, all of this stuff. Just don't bother. Now, at a certain point in the game, unbeknownst to the kids, it was prearranged that the general of one of the teams would just simply surrender to the opposing team, much to the chagrin of the kids on that team. So then we gathered everyone around, and it turns out that the winning team now, their general, that's Jesus. That's his team. And the losing team, the general is Satan. That was his team. The kids didn't know all this till the end, right? And so we gather now for the end of the game, and this is going to sound harsh, bear with me here, right? But the game ends with the losing team being executed. No, we didn't really execute the kid. Well, not most of them anyway. But they represented Satan's team, remember. So we know what happens to Satan and his team, right? But then it came to the townspeople, those who chose to not pick a side. And they were executed as well. And immediately we heard, but wait a minute. We weren't on Satan's side. And Jesus says, and you weren't on my side either. See, Jesus says in Matthew 12:30, he who is not with me is against me. And he who does not gather with me scatters abroad. There's damage done. So after the game, we did have this most incredible, this is a very sharp youth group. We had the most incredible discussion as the light bulbs started going off about what this game really represented. See, the simple fact that had to be driven home is one cannot remain neutral on the issue of Jesus Christ. We decide for him or we decide against him. A psychologist wants to ask the patient, do you have trouble making decisions? Well, answered the patient, yes and no. Yeah. See, here's one decision you're going to have to make, and there's no neutral. Claudia tried to get her husband, Pilate, to have nothing to do with Jesus. And Pilate did try, by the way. He tried to dismiss the issue by sending Jesus over to Herod. He tried to discuss the issue with Jesus. He tried to dodge the issue by letting the people choose. They chose Barabbas. He tried to disown the issue by washing his hands, but it didn't work because it doesn't work that way. There's no neutral. There's no walking away. There's no ignoring it. There's no pretending you can wash your hands of him. If you are not for me, then you are against me. Who do you say that I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And I am for you. I am for you. God, we come before you today and we proclaim that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And we thank you, God, if we are in that place where we have made that decision, we are for you and not against you. Thank you, God, that we are on your team. Help us now, Lord, to get as many townspeople as possible to join, because no one can be neutral. God, so give us the boldness, give us the strength, give us the wisdom to just share the good news that you are victorious. Amen. Amen. I'm going to ask